everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the MoeGamer Podcast. It's been a little while since we got together for various reasons that we're going to talk about a bit today, and also, bearing that in mind, we're going to take on a slightly different format today, an experimental format that will hopefully, in the long run, allow us to get together a bit more often and talk about things. So, before we get on with explaining that, who we are. I am Pete Davison from MoeGamer.net and ricedigital.co.uk, and I'm joined as usual by my good friend Chris Caskie from ccaskiearts.com. Hello!
Hey Pete, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. We're in the long hot summer months at the moment, so I'm sitting here with the window open and my fan on and still slightly too hot and sweaty. But apart from that, not too bad. Not too bad.
Yeah, it's gonna get hot here today for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, so to explain the reason why we want to try something a little bit different, we are both very aware that it's been a long time since we did our last podcast, and sort of since the start of the year, really, it's been quite tough for both of us to get together to do long discussions on particular topics that require some research and that sort of thing. So we decided collectively that what we're going to try and do is maybe get together a bit more often and do something a little bit more casual. So we're going to chat about stuff. We won't necessarily have a fixed topic. We'll talk a little bit about some of the news and stuff that's been happening of late, but we're not necessarily going to do like a formal list of news and what we've been playing and a specific topic each episode. It's just going to be things that we want to chat about each time, and that hopefully should take a bit of pressure off both of us, because we're both very busy chaps, and should be an enjoyable experience for both us and for you, the listener, as well, all being well. So before we go any further, I think it's probably behooves me to talk a little bit about what I've been up to and why I'm so busy of late, because I think I touched on this a little bit last episode, but I can't remember, so I may as well go through it again. Since the start of the year, I have been working as the editorial manager for ricedigital.co.uk, which is a site here in the UK that focuses primarily on Asian popular culture, video games, anime, manga, that sort of thing. It's been established for a long time now. It started as a site that was sort of mainly focusing on doujin games, but it's expanded over the years to basically cover all things Asian video gaming. And I've had the good fortune to be given a pretty much complete editorial leeway on what I'm doing with me and my team of freelancers. So we've been working hard on putting together some regular features each week, as well as some coverage on things like seasonal anime and new games and sort of underappreciated and overlooked games, as I always like to focus on as well. So, yeah, if you haven't yet stopped by Rice Digital since I took over in January, then do please check it out over there, because that's where the majority of my writing is happening these days. You may have noticed that sort of stuff on MoeGamer has slowed right down since the start of the year. I'm pretty much only posting the Atari A to Z videos and the Italian Mega feature over there at the moment, simply because I'm spending all day every day writing stuff, and so, you know, if I've spent all day every day writing stuff somewhere else, so the last thing I want to do in the evening is sit down and write some more stuff and put undue pressure on myself. So there's still some stuff to enjoy over at MoeGamer, but the majority of my stuff is at Rice Digital these days as well. Alongside that, I've also been doing some work with the folks over at Evercade as well. So I've been helping out with them getting prepared for the launch of the Evercade VS, which is something that we can talk about in a moment if you want to. So helping them get prepped with the launch for the Evercade VS. I've been doing a bit of testing, a bit of writing of the manuals and stuff, and so yeah, it's been super exciting to be directly involved with that project. When the VS actually comes out, you will see my name in the credits, which is very exciting to see. So, anyway, well, I mean, while I've mentioned it, then should we talk a little bit about the Evercade VS?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So
our frothing excitement for
yeah. So the Evercade itself is a year old now. It had its first anniversary, I think, yesterday, if I remember correctly. So if you're not yet familiar, the Evercade is a platform by Blaze Entertainment, who and they've been making an effort to do a retro console with officially licensed games. So you buy cartridges that are full of games. At the moment, the cartridges have sort of between 2 and 20 games on them, depending on sort of how recent the games are and sort of how quote-unquote perceived high value they are and that sort of thing. There's a library of, I think, 19 of them now, I think, something like that, 18 or 19, with a few more coming in the next couple of months. And the Evercade VS, which was announced a little while back at the time of recording, that is the home console version of the Evercade, because the first release of the Evercade was a handheld that you can hook up to the TV. But the Evercade VS is a proper console with 4 USB ports on the front for 4-player action. It's the first of these sort of mini retro consoles to do 1080p output as well, which is quite exciting. Give you lovely sharp edges on all your pixels. And they're also doing things like revamping the whole operating system for it as well. So it'll provide you with a bit more information on the various games and things as well. And there's some top secret things planned for the future as well that I'm not allowed to talk about at the moment. So
it's got Wi-Fi too, right?
Yes. It's
actually update it, firmware and stuff, like a proper console.
Yeah, that's right. So the Wi-Fi initially will be used just for firmware updates, and the firmware updates can also carry updates to the cartridges as well, just like the ones that you download and do through your computer at the moment. So if there are any issues with the games, which thankfully there haven't been too many of, because I mean these are retro games, so generally they've been working for 20, 30 years. But in some cases a few issues have arisen, particularly with stuff that's been rebuilt from prototypes or ported and that sort of thing. So there is the possibility for sort of fixing any issues that there might be with some of the games as well. And then the Wi-Fi being there opens up the possibility for future stuff as well, but again, nothing sort of officially announced or confirmed on that front yet, but exciting things in the pipeline for sure. So what are you going to play first on the big screen is the question.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question, because correct me if I'm wrong, but the Blaze folks are still sorting out licensing issues with the Namco carts, right?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Namco have been really awkward for some reason, and the 2 Namco Museum collections, which are currently available for the handheld, for some reason, the licensing agreement for those only applies to the handheld, so they're not allowed to make them work on the VS. So if you put them in, they'll... Excuse the noise outside. If you put one of those Namco Museum cartridges in the Evercade VS at launch, it won't work. So they are in negotiations to sort something out with Namco on that front. But it's important to be aware of that if you were hoping to play Pack Attack on the big screen, as I'm sure you were.
Yes, like unfortunately, like all the games that like pop into mind when it's like, what are you looking forward to playing for first? It was definitely Pack Attack and all the Splatterhouse games. Yeah,
Burning Force. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have an actual Burning Force cart, and I have the analog Genesis, so I play Burning Force enough on the TV, but like some of that rare stuff that I don't have. Yeah,
Burning Force is actually one of the few Mega Drive games that I do own as well, so yeah, not the end of the world, but
stuff like Phelios and like Splatter and the Splatterhouse 2 and 3, stuff that's kind of hard to get a handle on physically anymore. I've really been looking forward to. But I guess besides that stuff, I think my big thing that I really am excited for is like we always talk about when we muse about how much we love the Evercade, is all the weird shit. It's like I'm really looking forward to that Indie Heroes collection that's coming out.
Yep.
The Mega Cat stuff, all the weirdness on that first Pico collection. Like those like that like weird Hong Kong Shining Souls style. Shining Force style game. Like all that stuff, because I don't love RPGs handheld. I just like, it's hard. Like for me, like handheld is kind of just like a pick up and go thing. It's like to like kill 15 minutes. Like as much as I have like so many great RPGs on my like DS and 3DS and stuff, I don't play them as much as I'd like to. But because to me, it's just, I don't know. There's something about couch cozy eyes on screen that I love with an RPG. So I really want to dig into some of those, Draken and some of the that stuff would be great. Tanglewood I really want to play on the TV. I think the kind of pretty ambiance of like the forest scenes and stuff in the background art in that game's going to lend itself really well to being on the TV.
For sure.
Haven't experienced that. I'm also really looking forward to having it for the multiplayer opportunities. So, yes. I grew up when I was a kid. Like, what got me into video games was that like my mom and dad had an Atari 2600 that they bought when they were a couple, like before I existed.
Yeah,
they had their Atari 2600 for fun, and eventually they just kind of like gave it to me, or like I just kind of played it a lot as a kid before I got my Nintendo. So
yeah,
my parents have really fond memories of things like Air Sea Battle and Haunted House and the original Atari version of Asteroids. So like it's gonna be really cool to have those in a format where like when I spend time with my parents, I can be like, hey guys, you wanna play Air Sea Battle? And they'll be super excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's the new arcade cartridges that are coming as well, and the Atari collection in there has got Warlords, which is an amazing 4-player game. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Speaking of both the arcade carts and weird games, you're going to absolutely love the Galeco collection.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Galeco.
No, like I didn't either before I was sort of looking through this cart and testing it and doing some stuff with the manuals, but the games on there are just great.
Yeah, they have. I mean, it makes sense that I don't know anything about them because most of my like intense gaming focus, especially like arcade era stuff, is pretty much solely on like the Japanese developed market.
Yeah.
So like, Galeco is a Euro house, right?
They are Spanish. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, all their games have a really distinct visual style. Like it's more like it's a European comic and cartoon style that I would associate with that.
There's a fair bit of Japanese influence in there. Like there's a platform called Thunderhoop that is pretty shamelessly Dragon Ball Z inspired.
Okay.
But yeah, there's some Japanese influences in there, but it's also recognizable as having some Euro elements as well. And it's got that kind of I guess early to mid 90s Euro polish, I guess you would describe. Like it was mainly sort of French games that were known for this degree of polish in that kind of period, but it seems that the Spaniards were very good at it as well from what I can tell from this cart. Which is neat.
I'm really, really impressed. What's that one? That one's a shooting gallery style shooter. Alligator Hunt?
Alligator Hunt, yeah. That's a Cabal shooter that's got absolutely gorgeous graphics and animations. And it's a really odd game, but it looks amazing as well.
Yeah, it's really impressive looking. I've gone on record many times on this show for loving Cabal style shooters. Wild Guns is one of my favorite games of all time. So I'm really looking forward to playing a entry in that genre that I've never played before.
Yeah. It's I don't know how much you've read up on it as well, but this does some really interesting and surprising things as well if you get far enough. So look forward to that. So lots of things to look forward to. We've got the other carts in the because there's going to be sort of two main labels on Evercade now. There's going to be the red carts that we've got now, which are console games, and there's going to be these purple carts, which are the arcade games as well. So they're going to be two separately numbered lines as well. So if you just want to collect the arcade carts, or if you just want to collect the console carts, you can do that, or you can collect both, like we're inevitably going to. Yeah, for sure. I just. The arcade carts open up so much interesting possibility, and obviously more than I do, and there's things you're not allowed to discuss because of your business ties with them. But I just when I look at the arcade carts, I just think to my emulation MAME obsession days in high school, and God, what I wouldn't give for an IREM arcade cart with the arcade version of Gun Force and the arcade versions of R-Type 1 and 2. There's so much possibility there. Yeah. Well, I can say from what I've seen behind the scenes, the guys are working really hard both on licensing and on making sure that these games run well on the system as well. That is, I think, a really underappreciated side of what they do. These guys aren't just putting ROMs on a cart with an emulator. They are making sure that these games work well on the platform. They're making sure that the emulators are fully optimized. In a lot of cases, they've been sort of actually customizing the emulators to maximize performance on the handheld and on the console as well. So, yeah, they are really working hard to make sure that we get the absolute best possible experience from all these games. So, yeah, hats off to them, sort of knowing what hard work they put in on a daily basis. It's really sort of humbling to see how much they care for retro gaming and how much they care for making sure that revisiting these games in a official sense can be the best experience possible. So
yeah, I mean, I've often gone on record as not being a fan of emulation-based consoles, right? Like I don't own a single one of those mini consoles. But there's just something about the way the Evercade is made and curated. It just, the fact that everything's officially licensed, obviously, and you can just tell. Like it's just always a positive, polished experience.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's a simple thing, but just the simple act of putting a cartridge in is part of the magic of the system, because with those mini consoles that you described, yes, they've got all the stuff in there, but sort of stuff is all preloaded, so you don't have that sort of physical act of putting something in the console and sort of going, right, I'm going to play whatever Soldier Blade now or something like that, and actually putting the cartridge in there. That to me has always been an important part of the experience, and
yeah.
While the Evercade cartridges have multiple games on them, you've still got that choice to make. And it sort of provides a much greater sense of curation and that sort of thing, which really works well. So,
yeah, it's the care that's gone into not only understanding the games themselves, what makes them great, and what it takes to have them run properly, but understanding what people of our mindset want and need from a console. Like you can tell with the Evercade, the way the cartridges are produced in terms of their manuals, their cases, their appearances and labels, the consoles themselves, both the handheld and the new VS, how they're designed, they're visually appealing and distinct looking. It's made for people who care about physical media and games as both a business and art. Like it's a product that's not what I would. It's the antithesis of everything that like is problematic for me about like modern gaming and like the broad AAA corporate sphere, right? Where it's like gaming is a way, your EAs and Ubisofts and whatnot, right? They're corporations, and even like Sony and Nintendo to a certain degree, right? At the end of the day, it's business for them. But it's hard sometimes to parse out like the labor of love from a lot of these businesses, especially as you hear about developers being shut down for like one unsuccessful game and stuff like that. Yeah. So when you see a product like the Evercade, which is kind of, I don't know, boutique, I guess is the word I would apply to it. That's being made by people who care deeply about the product, not just as a way to make money and to make a living, but also as a way to pay tribute to archive and preserve, and specifically to please the target audience in a way that isn't manipulative. Yeah. It's just so refreshing that there's a product that just feels like it's for me. And I can just get so excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel exactly the same way, and like I say, that's why I'm so excited to sort of be involved with them and actually play a part in this and have my name in the credits of something that is that has sort of come to mean so much to me over the last year or so. So yeah, super excited for that. So the Evercade VS is due out in November of this year, and it will be coming out alongside 4 arcade cartridges. So there is what is it? Technos, Galeco, Atari, and what's the other one? Data East. So the premium package I think comes with Technos and Data East, if I remember correctly. The Founders Bundle, which I think is now sold out, that came with all 4 of the arcade carts. But as with the existing carts, the arcade ones will just be £15, $20 as well, so very, very affordable. And then by the time November rolls around, we'll also have All of the other currently announced red cartridges will be out as well, so we'll have stuff like the Codemasters collection will be with us. We'll have the Intellivision collection. We'll have the Mega Cat 2, Indie Heroes, Worms. So yeah, loads and loads of games to enjoy by the end of the year.
Oh, there's some neat stuff on that Mega Cat 2 cart. I really...
Mega Cat 2 is fantastic. I have had the good fortune to play through most of the stuff on there. There's some superb stuff on that one. So yeah, look forward to that.
Yeah, it's a good time. Yeah, and like the premium bundle is really hard to pass up. You know, you get 2 carts and 2 controllers right off the bat. Like it's such a good pickup.
Yeah, and they're working hard to make it compatible with as many USB controllers as possible as well. So they've made a particular effort to make sure it works with stuff like the who are they called? Is it IM8-bit or Retrobit?
Oh, Retrobit. Yeah, there's the two big players right now are in that sphere, are Retrobit and 8-bit Do.
Yes,
or 8-bit Do, or however I'm supposed to say that.
Yes. So they've been specifically working with those because they know how popular those controllers are. So those will be supported right out of the box as well. So if you've got some of those controllers, whether they're wired or wireless, they should work with the Evercade VS from day one. So yeah, that's very exciting.
As soon as the VS was announced and like the first images and the fact that it was USB compatible, like the first thing I thought of is I have that beautiful like special anniversary edition Saturn controller that Retrobit released that comes with a USB dongle and a Saturn dongle, and I was like, I can use Saturn controller to play all these amazing 2D games now. Like the Saturn controller has like the best D-pad for 2D games, and it's just it's going to be so perfect.
Yeah, really looking forward to that for sure. All right, okay, shall we move on a bit? Shall we talk a little bit about E3 because around this time, sort of for the last couple of years, we did a special E3 episode, and I think part of the reason we wanted to change format this year is E3 this year is such dog shit that I didn't think we could get a full episode out of it. So
yeah, that was what prompted the conversations about changing our format entirely. We're like, we don't have a topic in mind. We can't talk about E3 for a freaking hour. Let's radically revitalize the entire format of our show.
Oh dear. Well, so E3 this year, with the whole pandemic situation, it was an online only event. So we had the various press conferences and so on. We had Jeff Keighley standing around talking about stuff that no one really cared about. We had a Nintendo Directs and some things, and it was, it wasn't a complete write-off. I will say now, it wasn't a complete write-off, but compared to, if you think of E3s from like 10 years ago or something like that, and how much excitement there was around them, and how much hype there was for new things coming, and new hardware, and new installments in franchises, and new franchises, and that sort of thing, this year was just such a wet fart in comparison.
I was gonna say, it's just more like proof to me, I don't know, that like, we're probably going to eventually become pariahs for this, but just like the new Xbox and the new PlayStation are so uninteresting.
Yeah.
Like this was the first E3 with 2 new major consoles on the market.
And they had nothing.
And no one had anything interesting to share or show for those consoles. And everything that they showed for those consoles that was interesting was also going to be available on PS4 and previous generation Xbox. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, people came away from E3 saying that. I mean, you've always got to have someone who wins E3, don't you? So people came away from Nintendo's presentation saying that Nintendo won E3, and sort of in comparison to the other stuff that was going on E3, Nintendo was the strongest. But even for Nintendo, I think that was a relatively weak showing as a whole. I mean, they had Metroid Dread, which is amazing. We'll talk more about that in a moment. We had Advance Wars, again, which we'll talk about in a moment, which is also amazing. But I just felt like they just lacked that sort of universally appealing big hitter. That like it completely lacked like a Mario Odyssey 2 or something like that.
Yeah, and a lot of people thought that was coming. A lot of people, I can't remember. One of those, there's those like guys on Twitter who are like the leak guys. Like, I know all the insider knowledge, and they're like almost always right. And like one of those guys, I watched an interview with on YouTube, and he was like, my sources say that the Mario Odyssey team is working on a Donkey Kong reboot, like a full 3D like Mario Odyssey style, like a big 3D platformer reboot of Donkey Kong from a Japanese dev team. Yeah. And like people were freaking out, like we're gonna see this at E3 this year. And like this is a guy who was like right about a lot of things usually. So I don't know. I mean, he still could be right. Like it still could be happening, but like people were getting hyped up to potentially see that. And it was just like like the most exciting thing about the Nintendo for me was Advance Wars. So the most exciting thing for me is a 3D remake of like 2 Game Boy Advance games.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, of course Metroid looks good, but you know. The last 2D Metroid was good. The one that Mercury Steam did on the 3DS, the remake of 2, was quite good. So it's not like I haven't, you know, everyone keeps being like there hasn't been a 2D Metroid in a decade. Well, no, there was one like 2 years ago. And it was quite good. So
I think Mercury Steam are involved with this one as well, so sort of signs are good for this one also being good. And also there's the whole sort of troubled development history of this, which I didn't really know much about beforehand, but Metroid Dread has been on the way for like 10 years. They've been trying to make this game for such a long time at this point, and for it to finally be a thing that exists that we will be able to buy in October is actually kind of remarkable. But sort of during the Direct, they didn't make a huge deal of that. They put out a video almost immediately afterwards. It was like, here is the story of Metroid Dread, and everyone was like, oh, wow, that's kind of interesting. Maybe you should have made a bit more of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we can all agree that the new Nintendo guy is not nearly like the showman that Iwata was. Like, he doesn't really have a presence. No. So, like, I can imagine, like, someone like Iwata coming up and being, like, really doing, like, story building around that whole history to, like, create hype. But, like, I can't imagine the new guy doing that. He just doesn't look comfortable. He's just sort of polite Japanese businessman, isn't he? He doesn't have the sort of presence that Iwata had. So, yes, he is sadly missed. But, Advance Wars is cool. It was sort of even more cool now that we learned that Way Forward are working on it, which is super cool. It would be good to revisit those games because I played both of them, but sort of didn't get super into them because like strategy games are kind of a bit of a weak point in my sort of gaming skill set, I guess you'd call it. So I would get to a point in Advance Wars where I would just get frustrated and not be able to progress, and I'd sort of put them down and never go back to them at that point. But I love the way they look. I love the sort of personality of them, and although personally I would have preferred them to do these remakes with pixel art rather than the sort of Chibi 3D visuals that they've got now, the sort of the character animations in this are lovely. Yeah, it's really cool.
And if it plays as solidly as the originals, then cool. I will certainly give them another chance.
Yeah, I can't wait. Like, as soon as that announcement happened, I got so hyped and I started playing Tiny Metal.
Oh yeah.
Which is Tiny Metal is like an indie game that's basically just a new Advance Wars. It's worked on by some people, some of the same team members who worked on the original games. But it's available on modern consoles and it's quite good. So I'm just getting my Tiny Army Man's fill in a big way. This actually raises kind of an interesting point that occurred to me while sort of they were announcing Metroid Dread and people were being excited over it, and the thing is, although we haven't had, well, I mean, as you say, we had the 2D Metroid whenever that came out on 3DS and so on, but part of the issue with excitement over this is the fact that other people are doing Metroid and Castlevania and Advance Wars as well as, if not better than Nintendo at this point. Bingo. It was really hard for me to get excited about Metroid because I'm going to get a robot named Fight really soon. But, it's tough. And honestly, the stewards of these kind of legacies have not been doing as good a job as the indie sphere has been. Like, I'm always consistently disappointed by how much of a mess Bloodstained was. Like, you would be hard-pressed to find anything I could possibly be more excited in the world for than I was for Bloodstained, and it just was so meh. And but there's so many better games in that genre now, made by dudes of like groups of 3 in their attic, that like I don't really get that excited anymore, because like, you know, we were just talking. You just were telling me the other day you started playing Way Forward's Mummy Demastered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I just beat that a couple weeks ago, and that game's amazing.
Yeah. Also, that game is Super Metroid.
Pretty much so. It's like if Metroid and Contra had a baby.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And then, sort of recently over on Rice, I covered Astalon, Tears of the Earth, which is an amazing sort of Castlevania. But actually, it's not just Castlevania is the thing. What they've done with that game is they've blended elements of Castlevania, of Mega Man, of roguelites, of various other things, and they've created something that, although it's paying homage to these genres that people really like, it's also doing something new with them by blending all these different elements together. And so, yeah, there's so much exciting stuff going on in the indie sphere in that regard that, as you say, it's sometimes a little hard to get excited for certain ones. And I find it difficult to get excited for an announcement of a new game like this. I find it easier to get excited when I've actually played it for a bit. Like when Astalon was first announced, I saw it and I thought, oh, okay, it's another game that looks like an NES game that sort of claims to be inspired by the classics. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. And then I played it and I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And so that's a really tricky thing for today's developers, is actually getting people past that initial sort of, I don't know what you'd call it really, just sort of reluctance to actually try something, because first impressions count, but it's very difficult to sort of get across what's unique about your game without people being able to play them, actually being able to sit down and play them.
It's a very fine balance, because like I'm also like very anti the like people. Whenever someone drops like at the 5-hour mark, it gets really good. You know, like when people drop that, I'm like, no. If a game takes 2 hours to get good, the game's not good. Like I need to be engaged by, if not the story, then the mechanics or the visuals. Something about it needs to immediately, within the first hour, tell me it's worth my time. Because there's other games I can play that do that. So it's a very fine balance between being able to rope you in to convince you that it's worthwhile, and being able to do that in a time frame within its gameplay that isn't too far in that you've already lost the battle. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like I had a very similar experience with a game called Time Spinner a little while ago. I think I mentioned to you that I had been playing that, and I played all the way through that. And I had just kind of bought Time Spinner on a whim because it looked pretty, right? Like it looked like an SNES, like late era SNES, early era PS1 pixel art, side-scrolling game. And within the first 20 minutes, like, some of its mechanics had laid itself bare to me, and I was like, I'm gonna have to beat this game. That's what I need. You know what I mean? Like, I need that. Yeah. And I mean, what is valuable and good to you is going to vary from person to person as well. So for example, I know that something that I would have a lot more patience for than you would be something that sort of like is really good in the story in the first couple of hours, but takes a little while for the mechanics to catch up, if you see what I mean. So like if you think of the way that like a lot of modern Personas go, for example, most modern Personas from 3 onwards, they have like 2 hours of story to begin with, which a lot of people don't have the patience for. I love that. That gets me engaged immediately, but I also understand why people want to get straight into the action and doing stuff as well. So that's something that's always going to be different for everyone. But yeah, if something seemingly has no redeeming value whatsoever for the first 2 or 3 hours, then it's just, not going to keep you interested in the long term. Yeah. Like I always say, man, Final Fantasy VII. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Final Fantasy VII, hit start cinematic first battle sequence.
Yeah. Final Fantasy VII is the perfect opening. It's amazing.
Yeah. But so that's it's tough with what E3 is now. Did you watch Capcom's?
No. Capcom's the one that was all stuff that's already out.
Some stuff that's already out, but all stuff we knew. Like, there was no new announcements.
Yeah.
The only really new announcement, quote unquote, in the Capcom live stream was that DLC was coming for Resident Evil Village. No shit. DLC's coming for a popular AAA game. Yeah, but like they spent like 20 minutes talking about Monster Hunter Stories 2. Like, great, yeah. I'm super hyped for Monster Hunter Stories 2. You know when I became super hyped for Monster Hunter Stories 2? Last summer when you announced it.
Yep.
Like, I don't need you to spend time on this shit. I want to know what you're working on now. But I think, this is all, I think, endemic of the impact of the pandemic, really. Yeah. I don't think these companies had anything to show because these companies, unlike usual years, don't have as much stuff in the pipeline.
Yeah.
Between people working from homes, teams being dispersed, God forbid, people having passed. Like, there's probably just not as much in the pipeline as there would be, especially in the bigger spheres, in traditional developer environments where there'd be 100 people in a building together, collaborating. Yeah. That's why the most exciting stuff we're seeing right now is indie games, independent developers, like groups of 5 or 6 people, single independent developers of just one-man team stuff. That's what's really booming right now because that's what's possible in the past 2 years.
Yeah. Well, I think that argument can take you a certain distance. But I mean, Nintendo showed you can still reveal new stuff, or you can reveal new stuff about stuff we knew that was on the way.
Yeah.
Did you watch Take-Two's conference?
I didn't even know Take-Two had a conference. Also, remind me again, who is Take-Two?
Take-Two, they published Grand Theft Auto, so I mean, pretty good,
okay.
Right?
Yeah, they're the Rockstar people.
But yeah, one, the fact you didn't know Take-Two had a conference speaks volumes, and two, their conference showed no games at all, because their conference was a broadcast of a Zoom call about diversity and inclusion. Which is exactly what you want to see at E3, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, isn't like... Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because I think Rockstar's been in the news for all the wrong reasons in the past year or so. It was, like, revealed that, like, they were using, like, company money to, like, go to strip joints and shit, and, like, one of, like, the guys is just, like... like every major AAA developer, like one of the guys that runs one of the studios is a borderline rapist and an alcoholic and abusive to everyone. And surprise in the AAA sphere, no way. But like, I think they probably felt like that was necessary. But that's endemic of like.
But I mean, do it as part of your presentation. Say you're working on Grand Theft Auto 6, and then do like a 5-minute segment on diversity and inclusion is important to us. This conference, which was literally just a Zoom call on screen, went on for 45 minutes and had no game footage, no announcements of any games. It was just people talking.
Listen, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Same people quote won E3 this year that won E3 last year and the year before it. Sony won E3.
By not being there. Yeah,
by not
absolutely.
being there. By realizing that this shit is a waste of their time and money.
Yeah.
You can't be the most disappointing person on the pulpit if you don't show up in the first place. Like, Good on them for saving the effort and the money and actually funneling it into making games.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's true. It is sad, but it's true. Anyway, I think that's pretty much everything I want to say about E3 for now. But suffice to say, not exactly a whole episode in that. But that is partly why we're doing this. Anyway, other stuff I want to bring up from a sort of news perspective is the most recent thing that has come up that I want to talk about is the fact that 4 new Trails games are on the way. So if you're as behind on the series as I am, you can enjoy the fact that in total you have well over 1,000 hours of game to catch up on.
I was going to say, I still haven't played the last 4 Trails games I bought, so... I can't wait to notch that up to 8.
Yeah, perfect.
I often jokingly say that Trails is my retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what happened is that the Epic Game Store accidentally leaked all this a day early. So they put up the store pages for Trails from Zero, Trails to Azure, Trails to what's the other one called? Trails of Reverie, and Nayuta Boundless Trails. So what those are, Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure are the two Crossbell games that people have been clamoring for years at this point. They were originally PSP games that sort of followed up the Trails in the Sky games, and they sort of fill in a missing chunk of narrative that comes... I don't know if it comes between Trails in the Sky and Trails of Cold Steel, but it sort of happens at the same time, I think. But if you play Trails in the Sky, Trails from Zero, Trails to Azure, and Trails of Cold Steel, you will have the complete story of that game world. And then I think Trails to Reverie follows all of that, I think, is the way it works. Something like that.
Yeah, it's like the wrap-up, basically, you're saying. It kind of combines. There's going to be characters from, like, all of them in it.
Yes, yeah. So the exciting thing about the two Crossbell games is that a month or two back, there is a fan translation community called the Geofront. They completed their fan translations of both of those games. And what happened is that NAS approached them and said, "Hey, you've done some good work there. You want to work with us?" And they said, "Yes." So basically, the two Crossbell games that are already translated, NAS are going to take the work that the Geofront did on that existing fan translation, polish it up, maybe tweak a few things here and there, and that will be the basis of these new games. Because the Trails games have such notoriously massive scripts in them, the alternative would be these games don't come out for another 4 or 5 years. I mean, as it stands, Trails from Zero isn't coming out until autumn of next year, 2022, and Trails to Azure isn't coming out until 2023, which is still a long way off. But if NAS were starting from scratch, it would be even longer.
I really recommend, if anyone hasn't seen it, there's a YouTuber I really like. He goes by Matt McMuscles, and he does this recurring show he calls What Happened, where he looks he looks at sometimes failures in the game industry, sometimes successful games that just had like a notoriously rocky development cycle. Just like in general, he kind of digs into basically problematic development cycles. And he did an episode on the Trails in the Sky. Just really digging deep into the history of like the issues with the translation, and like all the many hands who touched it, and how many years it took for Trails in the Sky 2 to become a thing that people could, how many careers it destroyed just for its sheer massiveness.
Trails in the Sky 2 was a particularly notorious one because Andrew Dice of Carpe Fulgur, the guys who brought us Reciteer and Chantalise, was working on that.
And it like broke him.
He literally nearly killed himself over it. Like he did a full-on blog post explaining exactly what working on that project had done to him, and he nearly killed himself over that project. And it's just such a sort of heart-wrenching read to see that. Obviously, he felt so strongly about this project that he wanted to do a good job on it, but also it was absolutely crushing him with the weight of the expectations of the fans and the people he was working with and that sort of thing. There was so much riding on that he had real trouble dealing with that. So, and I completely understand. Now, thankfully, there doesn't seem to have been anything of that sort of severity as has happened with the project ever since. Like both Xseed's work on Cold Steel and NAS's work on Cold Steel since they took it over seems to have been managed very well, and they've even done things like sort of bringing people back on board who used to work for Xseed. Like they brought on Hatsu, Brittany Avery to help work on Cold Steel, with Cold Steel 3 and 4, for example. So hopefully the curse is broken, but that series has certainly had its fair share of troubles over the years.
Can we please just for a moment muse about our dream of a complete Trails in the Sky cart for the Switch? Of all three of them. Because I've invested in Cold Steel in the PS4.
Yeah.
Because I usually my rule of thumb is like if a game's got 3D visuals, I usually buy it on the PS4 because everything just runs better. So like I'll get Reverie, Trails into Reverie on the PS4 to go with my Cold Steel set. But these PSP ports, I'm totally getting on the Switch. They're just right for the Switch.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would love to see Trails in the Sky on Switch, as we saw. And if the Crossbow games sort of do well on Switch, I can potentially see that happening. So I think the part of the hesitation over these games, I think, is the fact that they're 10-year-old PSP games at this point. And so obviously releasing these to an audience in 2021, 2022 is always going to be seen as a bit risky. But I think Falcom fans, for all their many, many faults, have sort of demonstrated fairly ably over the course of the last decade or so that they want these games. And they will pay for these games. I
literally buy everything Falcom. I buy every Falcom game that gets translated into the West. And as we just discussed, whether or not I play them, I buy them. You know, I bought East Monstrum Nox right away, and I haven't even played East...
No, I haven't either.
East 8 yet. You know, I have all 4 Cold Steel games on the PS4. Haven't touched them. Hell, I have the original Legend of Heroes Gagarv trilogy on the PSP. All three of those, and I've only played the first one. Yeah. Like, I will buy anything with Falcom's name on it if you give me a physical copy. Day one, and I'm making a point to pre-order and pay full price. Yeah. Because to vote with my wallet, as they say. That's how you make the industry go. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's super important, and I think it's worth highlighting that the GFRent have said this on their post where they announced their involvement with NAS. They said, look, we've done all this work and we were providing these fan translations for free, but it was just because there was no way of getting an official English version of these. So what they've done is they've taken down their fan translations down. They've said, if you want to play these, buy them, because that's how you send a message to people that you want them. Which I think is... I haven't actually seen much backlash from it, but I suspect some people probably wouldn't have been all that happy about that. But
the internet.
You know, if you want proper localizations of things, if you want series to survive in your territory, you need to support them properly. So,
not to turn this into a screed about the responsibility of purchasing product and voting with your wallet, but I'll never forget. I had a friend back in college, and it was right when the last Onimusha game came out, Dawn of Souls, on the PS2.
Yeah.
And I went over to my friend's house with my new copy of that, and I popped that in. And we played it. He was like, "Yeah, this is pretty good. I'd pirate
it." Yeah.
And I was like, "No, you don't play it at all. The video games are not something you're entitled to have.
Yes.
You're not allowed to have them. You don't have a right to own or play a game." It is a product you buy because you are interested, because you see the people who made this thing deserve some of your money for the product they've produced, and you purchase it, and then you enjoy the product you purchased. Like, it's just, this is the contract. This is the market. This is how art, and even commercialized art, as much as video games are commercialized art, not art in the truest sense, but this is how the production of media and entertainment works. You're not entitled to anything.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a worryingly widespread viewpoint these days. Like, particularly with streaming video and stuff as well, like anime and stuff. So many people think they are entitled to episodes of anime without paying for them because they don't like Crunchyroll or they don't like Funimation or whatever. It's like, well, fuck off, because those people are bringing these episodes to you. They are making sure that they have a presence in the West. So, if you want to watch them, you don't just have the right to watch those things because you're interested in them. You need to show that you have an interest in them. You show that you care about them.
Sure. I mean, and like I said, not to turn this into a whole huge lecture about like the moral implications of like piracy and buying things and not buying things, but like I can and have and will make arguments in defense of certain types of piracy, such as emulation. Like, rest assured, now this was something that has both been announced. That's how long it's been since we did episodes, right? It was both announced and then reversed, right, with the whole Sony PlayStation Network thing, that the PlayStation, the PSP and PS3 games were going to go away on the PlayStation Network. And rest assured, if that would have happened, I would have been the first person to say, you are now morally, you get a free pass for wanting to pirate any of those games. Yeah. Because you cannot buy them on the marketplace you cannot buy them on the marketplace in such a way that supports the original artists. Buying games used do not support the creators of that content, and the companies who can sell them for profit so that the artists and original manufacturers of the product benefit are no longer interested in selling you the product. So if you can't purchase a product in such a way that benefits the people who created the product, have at it.
I agree.
But as soon as it's, but if it's commercially available in such a way that does that, then you have an obligation morally to support that product. Example would be, I've paid no short amount of lip service to R-Type 3 on this podcast. It's one of my favorite shoot-'em-ups of all time. I've emulated it my whole life because it was no longer in publication when I discovered it. And I wasn't going to pay $100 to $200 for a Super Nintendo cartridge used to line some scalper's pockets on eBay. I just wasn't going to do it. It doesn't benefit IREM. It doesn't benefit any of the people who made the product. So I emulated it for most of my life. But IREM paired up with Retrobit and made an officially licensed re-release of R-Type 3. So I immediately bought it because I had to. I wanted to support this product and pay for it in such a way that sends my vote and my voice through to both the publishers and creators that more of this, please. That's how the market. That's how the market works.
Yeah, exactly. I was exactly the same with Shantae. It's like a while back when I did my MoeGamer feature on Shantae. I played the original Shantae 2 emulation because there was no practical way of getting the Game Boy version without paying £350 for it.
Yeah, in a way that doesn't benefit Way Forward.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
That $350 doesn't go to Matt Bozon. Like it
goes to some eBay scammer who's probably made a reproduction anyway. So, so the moment that physical release was announced through Limited Run Games, I was like, I need to own that. I'm probably not going to play Shantae again for a long time, but I need it in my collection because I had so much enjoyment from that game. I will want to play it again someday, and the fact I can support it again in an official way, perfect. So yeah, I agree entirely.
Yeah.
All right. We've been going for nearly an hour, so do you want to take a short break and then we'll come back and talk about something else?
Yeah, let's do that. Then we can spend some time on what we've been playing.
Yeah, sounds good to me. All right, we'll take a short break now then, so we'll see you in just a moment. Welcome back. So, after our discussion of the news in that first segment there, we realised there's one thing we didn't talk about that we wanted to pay a bit of lip service to before we move on to talking about some of the things we've been playing recently. And that is that several companies have announced that they're going to start doing physical exclusive games. I think the first to announce this was Super Rare Games, who have put together a sort of sub-label called Super Rare Shorts. And then that was followed up by Devolver's limited press house Special Reserve, saying that they were also going to do something very similar and release games that were physical exclusive that were supposedly never come to digital download platforms. Super Rare's justification for this was that they are sort of funding the development of these games that otherwise probably wouldn't get greenlit by a publisher, or might struggle to sort of find a foothold in the market. So they're keen to kind of encourage experimental and interesting indie games and that sort of thing, things that would be risky under normal circumstances, and just release them as these sort of collector's items, so that people can show their support. Developers of them can earn a bit of money from them that they can then use to plow into their other projects. And I haven't sort of seen Special Reserve's specific explanation of why they're doing this as well, but I suspect it's something pretty similar as well. So sort of an opportunity for developers to put together a game that they know is only going to sell a certain number of copies, but assuming it does sell those copies, it will help them to fund more ambitious, bigger projects from there as well. So
yeah, and with this model, when they produce a run of however many copies, they'll produce however many copies is necessary to make the whole effort financially soluble, and they're almost guaranteed to sell that amount. So it's very much a winning scenario from the financial perspective.
I think the thing I find interesting about this, and the reason I think this is actually quite a good idea, is because there's already attention on people like Super Rare and Special Reserve due to the fact that they do these limited releases already. These physical only releases are going to get a lot more attention than they would if they were just immediately released and buried in the depths of the eShop or the PlayStation Store or whatever. These games are going to get noticed. Whereas if you just release something into the digital marketplace, it gets lost almost immediately. Like as we'll discuss in a moment, so a lot of people are very, very angry about this idea because they think it's sort of withholding access to creative works, to works of art or products and that sort of thing. But the fact is that their main argument against this is like, oh, you should just release it on itch. It's like, have you seen the front page of itch? The front page of itch moves so quickly. There is so much stuff released on there every day that you release something and it's gone within less than a day. It's like, how do you expect anyone to find your game on a platform like that these days? I mean, itch is great. I love itch for what it does. I love itch for being a platform for anyone to release their game, whatever it is, whatever subject matter it's covering, whatever sort of creative take on mechanics it's doing, whether or not it's just an interactive work of art or whether it's an actual game or something. I love it for doing that, but the fact is that discoverability on it absolutely fucking sucks.
I was gonna say, I don't even have the time to commit to looking for things on itch. Like itch, like trying to find something you want to play on itch is like the equivalent of like using your nose to try to find a Skittle in a litter box.
Like a while back, I bought that bundle for racial equality from itch that had like 1,000 games. Do you know how many of those games I've played?
Oh, maybe 2?
None of them.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah, I have played none of those games because there are so many of them. I have no idea where to start.
Yeah. It's just that, I mean, that's endemic of digital and like Steam. Like 400 Steam games.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do or where, and like they're so disposable to me because I got them for like $1 in like a Humble Bundle or something. Yeah. And it's just like I got out of that game a long time ago because it wasn't really like rendering any enjoyment for me.
No, exactly. I mean, this is relevant to talk about right now because as we record this, the Steam sale started yesterday. I have bought nothing in that because I am pretty much immune to it now because I place such an emphasis on buying physical versions of games these days, because when I buy a physical version of a game, I see it on my shelf and I think, oh, I should give that a go. Whereas if it's in my Steam library, I just forget about it.
That's right. Yeah, it's an act of, like we were discussing in the previous segment. It's when you buy a physical game like that, more than anything, and you pay that premium price for the physical product. It's a vote of confidence in the product, and visibility. And the other thing to remember too, that people are getting angry about this whole phenomenon with these physical only games, is these companies are being sensitive to the general complaints people have about this kind of boutique limited press model, and just because they're doing this as physical only doesn't mean they're also only making 2,000 copies. Like for instance, a Special Reserve with their with Demon Throttle, their first title they've announced, and they've been very clear and used very specific language in all of their press releases that everyone who wants a copy of Demon Throttle will be able to get one. The pre-order window is massively long. We're talking months, not weeks. Like they're not trying to scalp with this. They're not trying to create scarcity with this, but they very clearly developed a business model that financially makes their funding of the production of these games make sense and come out black. And that's what we want. We want everyone to be made whole. We don't want people to lose money on developing games. Yeah.
And I think one thing worth remembering that a lot of people seem to forget is that all this is how you bought games before digital platforms were a thing.
That's the big joke. Like really, child? I remember a time. You know, it's just.
And I mean, right down to the fact that there were only a certain number of copies out there in the wild. Like, a small-scale budget game on the PS2 would only have a few copies available. So if you didn't get it when it was first released, then you didn't get it. Unless you sort of bought a traded-in copy. So, I don't know. I think there may be a generation thing at play here.
Yeah, it's very possible. It's very, very possible. Yeah, I don't understand where the rage is coming from. You know, I keep bringing it up in this episode just because we keep hitting on topics that are relevant to it. But like voting with your wallet, there is an inverse property as well, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't appreciate something, you don't appreciate a company's business practices, you don't support them.
Yeah,
you don't buy the product.
Mm-hmm.
You don't agree with this practice? Cool. Don't buy these games.
Yeah.
You're not entitled to them because the publication model doesn't suit something that's acceptable to you.
Yeah.
It's up to a seller of a product how that product is sold. And they've clearly done the math and the strategizing to understand that this is a model that allows them to be soluble for this product. So you either buy it or you don't.
Yep, exactly. I agree completely. But not everyone does.
But not everyone's an adult on the internet.
Very few people are an adult on the internet, in my experience. Anyway, yeah, we just wanted to touch on that because that's something that was worth talking about. I think what we want to shift the discussion over towards now is some of the stuff we've been playing of late. So, what have you been up to?
Well, as I mentioned in the previous segment, I've been playing a lot of Tiny Metal, which has just been delightful. It's a really pleasant, modernized take on the Advance War formula. I think that the genre that's kind of settled into title-wise, they call it Japanese arcade strategy action.
Okay.
The idea is that with these games like Advance Wars, as opposed to other strategy RPGs, like these aren't RPGs because there's no development of character.
Yeah.
In Advance Wars, you are presented with a map. That map is the combat scenario, and all units are expendable. It's not like Final Fantasy Tactics, where you have a character that levels up and develops skills throughout the course of the game. Each map is a fresh experience that you start from the ground up and build your strategy and try to beat that map as a challenge. So there's very much an arcade feel to the way that's structured. So that's kind of the genre that this has been dubbed. And it's exciting because now that they have a title for it, people know how to describe their games when they make something in that sphere. Yeah. I can't recommend Tiny Metal enough. It's really just a new Advance Wars, the end. In all but name, and I'm totally there for that. The other thing that I've really been putting a lot of time into, and I know I'm going to get boo hissed over this because I just I probably went off on screeds about AAA development probably 4 or 5 times in the previous segment, but am I in love with Assassin's Creed Origins? My gosh.
Which one is that? Because I get so confused with which Assassin's Creed is.
That's the ancient Egypt one.
Right, yeah, I thought it was. And that's the one where they went a bit more action RPG, isn't it?
Is
that right?
So good. Yeah, it's totally... it takes what was good about prior Assassin's Creed entries and really just gets rid of what didn't work, and then infuses it with just the right amount of RPG style character development, where it really you feel so much more invested in it and like developing your dude. There's gear that drops with the traditional like color coded like rare like common, rare, epic, and they'll have stats applied. There's just your character gains experience and levels up in a traditional fashion, and unlocks skill points to build to gain new skills, and all that's wonderful. It's mechanically wonderful. But the real thing that's amazing is just this beautiful HD, fully explorable rendition of the ancient Nile Delta.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing the series has always been good at, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. That's why I always say, like, I love Assassin's Creed for all its warts, because I'm a history nerd, and it's a history playground. It's like, last night, before I went to bed, I scaled the lighthouse of Alexandria. Like, it's really, really cool. And I just, we've talked before about both the detractions and the benefits of games with open world structure. And to me, and I think this is something that, we've talked about off the cast, but you've kind of come around on Elder Scrolls a bit and started to really enjoy Oblivion, playing it in a bubble away from the hype, because you've been able to really enjoy just like exploring and faffing around and doing your own thing. Yeah. The best open world games are the ones where you don't necessarily have sort of a critical path to follow, and you just have a bunch of stuff that you can stumble across and cool stuff happens. And I don't mean in the sort of markers all over the map that you need to systematically clear off. I mean things that you just wander around and you think, oh, that looks interesting, I'm going to go and investigate that. And that for me is where I've been able to enjoy Oblivion in particular in a way that I sort of haven't in the past. So. Sure. And I'm having very similar experiences with Assassin's Creed Origins. It's very much, when Breath of the Wild was new, right? When Zelda Breath of the Wild first came out, people were talking about Zelda Breath of the Wild as if open world games hadn't existed ever before. Yeah. Like, and it was really weird to me. I mean, maybe part of it was people who had never really played an open world game before, and this was their first one. But, one of the things that was constantly bandied about when people talked about Breath of the Wild was like, oh, in this giant world, you see something that's interesting off in the distance, and you're compelled to go explore it just for the sake of your own curiosity. Yeah, that's how open world games have always worked. It's how they're supposed to work anyway. Yeah, I mean, and yes, Zelda did some specific things with that differently, but that has always been at the core of the open world experience. And like, it's especially prevalent in AC Origins, because it's giving you this world and this culture that, unless you're Egyptian, or an Egyptologist, you probably don't have a hell of a lot of knowledge or experience with. So it's just been, to me, like, oh, what's that building over there? Do-do-do-do-do. Oh, it's a date farm. Do-do-do-do-do. Oh, well, I'll talk to the lady that runs the date farm. Oh, no, she's being harried nightly by raiders. Oh, well, I'll go help her and find where the raider camp is and take them out. Like, it's very much like that. And, like, obviously there's a main narrative story that you can run through, and, like, but the real joy of this game is that it's allowing me to explore the history and culture of ancient Egypt and have like cool action fun while like helping out strangers. It's these little stories that make it amazing, not so much the big narrative, which is kind of throwaway. And I'm loving every minute of it. I can't stop playing it.
Cool. Well, I mean, I've got a game that I can talk a bit about in that regard as well, and it's sort of outside what people might normally associate with what we talk about here and the sort of things I'm best known for covering. But I want to talk a bit about SnowRunner.
Oh, okay.
SnowRunner.
I don't know this game.
SnowRunner is it's the third in a series called Spin Tires, which started off as a fairly sort of freeform simulation of off-road driving on PC. And it became very well known for having really, really excellent sort of terrain modelling and terrain deformation and so on. So it was one of the most sort of in-depth simulations of what tyres do on dirt, basically, and how it sort of churns it up and that sort of thing. And over the course of 3 games, they've kind of really expanded this into sort of less of a sort of completely freeform sandbox and something with a bit more structure to it now. So SnowRunner is this 3rd game, and what they've done is they've made sort of these they feel like large open worlds, but actually in terms of physical area, they're not huge. But because you are driving vehicles that sort of average about 5 miles an hour in them, they feel pretty large. And basically what they've done is there are exactly what you were describing about just there. There are things all over the map that you can sort of you can drive around and you can discover, and you drive up a road and you go, oh, okay, so a power line's fallen over here, so I need to do something about that. So in order to sort that out, I need to go and get some metal from the town, and I need to go and get some scaffolding and some wood planks and that sort of thing. So you drive your truck back up to the town, you go and collect the bits, you take it back to the pylon, you sort out the pylon, and then the road's clear, so you can explore a little bit further and so on. And it's just a game in which the joy of exploring in vehicles that are really fun to drive just really comes to the forefront. It's not an arcade style thing by any means, and it's not quite a full simulation either, in that it's not like super in-depth on all the switches you have to press and that sort of thing, but there's just a really nice balance between sort of the satisfaction of driving a big truck in a video game and sort of having to think about how you're going to get around this world as well. Lots of different vehicles to drive. So you've got little jeeps and stuff that are intended for sort of exploring around the place, and then you've got absolutely huge trucks with cranes on the back that you can sort of grab things with and sort of pull things out of swamps and all sorts of things. It's a really fun game, and it does all of those things that you're just describing with open world. So you sort of think, oh, okay, there's a radio mast on top of that mountain over there. I wonder if I can get this truck up there. And you then spend half an hour driving at 2 miles an hour with your differential lock fully engaged in first gear, crawling up this mountain, hoping that you don't tip over the side and land on your roof.
I mean, we've talked about that off-cast too, like when you were telling me about the fun you've been having lately with Midtown Madness. It's just like, for some reason, there is a special joy in games in driving big, stupid, slow, powerful vehicles.
Yeah.
Like, even in something as simple as like GTA 5, I love doing the tow truck missions.
Yeah.
I just like love driving a big clunky tow truck around, like trying to back it up without destroying everything. Yeah. So I mean, at the time of recording, I've just put out a video on Midtown Madness 3, and during that video in Midtown Madness 3, I discovered the joy of the bus. I watched it. It's so much fun.
Yeah, and like the reason it works so well is that I play from the over the bonnet view in Midtown Madness 3, and what they've done in Midtown Madness 3 is they've really done a good job of sort of positioning your viewpoint as it would be if you were sitting in that vehicle. So sort of like I have. Whenever back in my sort of childhood, we took the bus to school every day, so I have a lot of memories of sitting on a bus and sort of looking out the front of the bus and being familiar with that perspective and so on.
Same.
And Midtown Madness 3 just sort of absolutely nails that feeling of what it's like to be on a bus and how far above everything on the ground you are. And there's just something incredibly satisfying about it, something incredibly enjoyable about driving that vehicle, particularly when combined with Midtown Madness's exaggerated physics. So you can just absolutely plow through the traffic in front of you, send it scattering in all directions. It's marvelous. There's nothing quite like it.
I'm down.
But yeah, so SnowRunner is not quite as exaggerated as that, but it does still have plenty of sort of emergent silly moments for you to happen. Like I was saying, normally when climbing up a very narrow, foresty, muddy path up to the top of a mountain that you need to get to the top of, and like you're sort of creeping over these rocks and so on, and you feel your car tipping over to the side, and you think, oh shit, this is not going to go well. And I've got this great screenshot of like my Jeep on 2 wheels on its side, sort of right close to the summit of a mountain, and I'm just like, shit.
This is why we play video games. breadth of experiences.
Uh-huh.
It's just amazing to me what you can do at any given time. Like,
yeah.
I have no desire to play, certain stripes of games, but I'm still exceedingly grateful that they exist. Like, I think about the entire massive communities involved in things like Farm Simulator, and I don't want to play Farm Simulator, but it's so cool that it's there for people who have those proclivities to just invest themselves in it.
Yeah. But there's a YouTuber I like watching called Squirrel. I think I mentioned him around the time that Microsoft Flight Simulator came out, because he is a simulation specialist.
Okay.
He plays a lot of games that I probably wouldn't want to actually play, but it's entertaining to watch him play them because he knows what he's doing. And also he's willing to sort of explore things in ways that I perhaps wouldn't think to do. So at the moment he's playing a game called Landlord Super, for example, which is it's basically a first-person game about building stuff, but in an oddly realistic sort of way. So like the main thrust of the game is that you've bought a house, but it's a complete shithole and falling to pieces, and your job over the course of the whole game is to basically rebuild it and turn it into a functional house. Mm-hmm. But it does that in sort of a really in-depth level of detail. So like laying bricks, you've got to mix up your mortar, you've got to spread the mortar on there, you've got to flatten the mortar out, then you put the bricks in the right places and that sort of thing. And I have no desire to play that. But like you say, I love that it exists, and I appreciate the fact that that Squirrel makes entertaining videos about this as well, because it's enjoyable to watch him engage with it because he knows what he's doing. Like I say, he engages with it in a way that I might not perhaps think to. So
one of my all-time favorite YouTube channels is that guy you clued me into who does the flight simulator. Like they run the airport.
Oh, Air Force Proud 95, yeah. He's amazing.
That's like the greatest YouTube. Like, I couldn't give two shits about Flight Simulator. But those guys are so funny, and they help me understand the game better and like why people play it. And it's just amazing to me that that's a community that even exists.
Yeah. Air Force Proud is amazing. He's done some absolutely hilarious videos. I love it. But so lots of broad experiences, and I think this sort of brings me on to a topic I think is worth talking about in terms of breadth of experiences. And just recently finished at the time of recording is Steam Next Fest, which I don't know if you looked into this at all, but
no.
Steam Next Fest, or various Steam Fests that they seem to do throughout the year now. They are sort of showcase events for developers who are working on stuff but they haven't finished them yet. So
I did hear about this. I just kind of didn't engage with it.
Yeah. So it's basically a big demo showcase. So they have a big part of the store that is just demos. And you can sort of look by different categories of games and that sort of thing. So you think, oh, okay, I want to see demos of roguelikes. I want to see demos of platform games. I want to see demos of driving games. And so over the course of this last Steam Next Fest, I downloaded a few different demos and tried them, and I think they're all worth talking about in different ways because they're all very different kinds of games. But I had a lot of fun with them. So the first one I want to mention is Tormented Souls, which is a game from, I think they're Chilean, the developers.
Yeah, that's getting a physical release, isn't it? I see pre-orders opening for that.
Yeah, that's right. So this is a game that's coming for PC, PS5 and Switch. I think they're considering a PS4 version as well, but at the moment it's PC, PS5 and Switch.
If it can be on Switch, it can be on PS4.
Exactly.
Come on.
Exactly. And the big deal with this is that it is classic style survival horror. So it is specifically paying homage to the original Resident Evil, the early Silent Hill games, and Alone in the Dark.
Oh.
So it's fixed camera angles, but it's done with a 3D engine, so they move like they do in the original Silent Hill. So that provides plenty of scope for sort of deliberately uncomfortable camera angles that feel like something is following you and that sort of thing. And it's got the sort of classic setup of sort of creeping around in the dark in an old abandoned hospital and that sort of thing. And there's horrible monsters that are straight out of your nightmares. There's a really interesting mirror world mechanic in it as well. where rather than the Silent Hill approach where you do the stuff in the light world, then you do the stuff in the dark world, what happens in Tormented Souls is that you find these mirrors hidden away in sort of secret rooms, and you can step through the mirror into the mirror world, and stuff that you do in the mirror world will then affect the real world in various ways.
Okay.
So in the demo that was available during the Steam Next Fest, a good example is you go into this ward in the hospital, and you find a corpse on a table that is holding something that you need to get hold of. But because the corpse has got rigor mortis, you can't open her hand up and get the thing out of her hand because it's so tightly gripped in there. And you see that she's lying there. She's hooked up to like medical equipment, and her chest is open and her heart is missing. And you're like, okay, that's a bit weird. As you've been exploring the other parts of the hospital, you will have stumbled across these two bits of a plastic heart that you find. And so, obviously, the first thing you'd think to try is to put the plastic heart in there, but obviously that doesn't work because that doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. But you step in, you
never stopped survival horror games before from
exactly. It's never stopped survival horror games from making sense, but in this case, it doesn't work. So what you do is you explore a bit further, and you find one of these mirrors, and you step into this dark mirror dimension, and you go to where this corpse was, and instead of where the corpse is, there is a doll lying on the table with its chest open. So you put the plastic heart in the doll instead, and the doll comes to life and is all creepy and so on. And then when you go back into the real world, this lady mysteriously has her heart again, and her heart is beating again. It allows her hand to release the thing that she was holding, and you can grab it. And of course, in true survival horror tradition, if you leave the room and then come back again, she's gone.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, that sounds lovely. That sounds very much in the tradition of I'm thinking about that, like, interesting kind of golden era of PS2 survival horror when we got amazing shit like Rule of Rose and Haunting Ground. Yes.
It's very much like the Silent Hill games in particular are probably the best description of it, because there is combat. There's not a lot of combat, but there is combat. But there are complex puzzles. It's not just simple Resident Evil, put the thing in the thing puzzles.
Yeah.
It is proper complex puzzles with riddles, with things that you need to pass out for yourself, with connections between pieces of information that you need to determine for yourself rather than having them pointed out to you. And so, yeah, it's really, really cool, and I'm very much looking forward to the full version of that. So if you like the sound of that, then take a look, because it looks lovely. And as you say, there are physical versions available for pre-order now, so you can nab one of those.
Is it full analog movement, or is it like tank rotate movement?
You can do either. If you use
please.
If you use the D-pad, you can rotate tank controls, whereas if you use the analog stick, it's more like more recent stuff. So both.
That's the reason I didn't like survival horror games growing up, because like I can't wrap my head around tank controls.
Mm-hmm.
So like when like modern survival horror started happening with analog control, I was just like started playing them then. It's great. So I'll have to keep an eye out for this. I love puzzles, so like if the complexity of puzzles is there, then this is definitely something I would be into. I specifically, I mean, I've been opening up to Resident Evil a lot lately, just because some of the newer stuff's been pretty amazing. But generally speaking, like the shooty shoot bang bang, like I don't really like a lot of guns in my survival horror, because guns are inherently not scary.
Yeah.
I would much rather be like a lost and confused 16-year-old girl with like a broken broomstick is the only thing I have. That to me is survival horror. So I'd really be interested to explore this.
Yeah. This is great. You are basic. Yeah, you are a scared and confused. She's not 16, but she's like early 20s or so. But
sure.
Yeah. Like I say, there is combat. You do get a weapon early on, but it's like an improvised shit weapon. It's a nail gun that doesn't really work very well.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So
they had some fun with this. You can tell they had some fun with this, because that's just like pure horror gold right there. Like, fending off monsters with a nail gun. That's amazing.
But yeah, that is looking great. So that was one of the big highlights for me. Another one at the completely opposite end of the spectrum. I tried the new one from Witchbeam, the creators of Assault Android Cactus.
Oh, they have something new come in the way?
Yeah, you'll hate it, but but it is worth a look. It's a game called Unpacking, and what it is it's a game about unpacking boxes, and it's kind of positioned as a puzzle game, but it's not really a puzzle game. I guess it sort of is, but what you do is you have this lovely sort of isometric pixel art representation of a room. So you like the visual side of it, certainly. There's this lovely sort of pixel art representation of a room, and there's a bunch of cardboard boxes in there. So you click the box to open the box, you click the box again to take something out of the box, and then you click where you want to put the thing that you've taken out of the box somewhere in the room. So you put it on a shelf, you put it on the bed, you put it in a drawer, you put it in a cupboard, whatever. And what you do is you gradually unpack all these boxes, put all the stuff in where you think its right place is. When you've emptied all the boxes, it tells you if anything is in massively the wrong place, and you can correct that. But other than that, you have a reasonable amount of freedom to put things where you want. And kind of the intention behind the game is that it tells a completely wordless and characterless story. So what you're doing is you are unpacking the boxes of this same character at several different points in their life. And so you'll be able to tell things about them from the things that they've chosen to keep and the things that they've left behind, and the layout of their room and all that sort of thing. So it's a really interesting and very sort of relaxing kind of game that doesn't really have a lot in the way of quote-unquote game-like elements to it, but it's very enjoyable.
Yeah,
it's very enjoyable
from a narrative perspective. It's like when in the last level, when it's only one box and all that's in there is a bottle of whiskey and a handgun. You can interpret.
Yeah, but it's like interesting. So in the demo they had two of these stages that are going to be. So it was obviously the person's childhood room, and then what looks like maybe like their first apartment after leaving home or something like that. So it's like a small apartment. So in the first one you're just unpacking their bedroom, but in the second one you can sort of move back and forth between their kitchen and their bathroom and their bedroom, and you sort of, there's the thing where when you move house you put certain things in the wrong boxes sometimes as well. So you'll be unpacking the kitchen and you'll sort of pull a bra out of a box or something like that, and you're like, that doesn't go there. But yeah, it's really interesting. Beautifully presented. It's got a lovely soundtrack by what's his name? Jeff Van Dyke, I think it was. He was the guy who did the music for Cactus as well. And like I say, a really lovely isometric pixel art type aesthetic as well. So gameplay wise, it's not going to be for everyone for sure. But if you are interested in intriguing methods of storytelling and relaxing puzzle-like experiences, then that's definitely one worth giving a look.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'd never heard of this. I had no idea Witchbeam was even working on something else.
Yeah. I think they only announced it relatively recently, but they have been working on it for a while, I think. So, but yeah, that's from them. Other stuff that I found noteworthy and interesting. There was a game called Black Academy I played, which I primarily looked at because cute anime girl on the thumbnail, and I thought, okay, let's give that a look. What they've done here is they've done a roguelite shoot 'em up.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing your article about this.
Yeah, so what you've got in this is you've got a magical girl shoot 'em up where you are flying through various stages and shooting down enemies and so on. But at the end of each short shoot 'em up stage, you have a choice of these different portals that you can go into, and there's like a complete level map of how all these portals link together. So you're basically exploring a level while doing horizontally scrolling shoot 'em up. And you stumble across keys and chests, and the chests have different weapon upgrades in them. And there's loads and loads of different weapons. So you start with sort of a basic forward firing shot, but there's like a weapon that's like the wave beam in R-Type, and there's things that you shoot out and they explode, and there's homing missiles and all sorts of things like that. So each run is quite different, and you gradually make your way to a boss at the end of a stage, and there's bullet hell elements in those boss fights, and yeah, it's cool.
Sounds
at the moment
great.
Yeah, it plays really nicely. It's got nice, smooth and responsive controls. It's obviously a very early version that this demo was, because there's a lot of features missing and a lot of rough edges to it, both in the visuals and the script and so on. But there is a ton of potential in that game. So I hope that ends up being a good one. That is from a Korean developer, I think. But it's got a shockingly high quality anime intro that sort of introduces the whole thing. Which I was surprised to see, but the whole thing has the potential to be really, really cool, with sort of polishing off some of those rough edges. So that's certainly worth a look.
Neat, yeah, that sounds really. I mean, that's what could I want more than roguelite gameplay
and shoot 'em up
meshed with a shooter? Like that sounds like heaven.
Yeah, exactly. Another one you might find interesting is a game called Glimmer in Mirror. Okay. Which is it's an open structure side-scrolling 2D platform game with some absolutely gorgeous visuals. You play this girl who was sort of floating in the void of emptiness, and she found a mirror, and the mirror shattered, but she found herself inside the mirror, and all stuff that doesn't really make sense. But
sure.
Basically, you find yourself in this other world, and you explore the other world, and you shoot stuff. So the actual combat in it is very sort of run and gun style. So she sort of shoots out magic blasts really quickly as you hit the fire button. You explore, you find stuff, there's boss fights, there's some sort of light but not too obtrusive narrative going on as you progress, and like I say, the main attraction in this one is the incredible visuals and animation. It's a beautiful game. So that's well worth a look. The demo for it was quite short and doesn't show you a ton of what the final game would involve, but it takes you through sort of an initial area and a boss fight and a little bit of the narrative. Again, a few rough edges to polish off here and there, particularly with regard to the English script. But again, early days, and that's something you sort of do later in the development process anyway. So that's definitely well worth your time.
Yeah, that sounds really cool too.
Yeah. So lots of really cool things coming out of Steam Next Fest. So the next time one of these fests happens, I don't know how often they're planning on doing them. But next time that rolls around, then be sure to take a look at some of the demos, because there's some really interesting stuff going on there.
And you'll build your list of things to go on the limited run forums and
definitely,
and scream about wanting a copy of.
Yeah, definitely. One thing worth noting, actually, which a lot of people don't seem to be too aware of, is that adding stuff to your wish list on Steam is really helpful for developers, because it's like an important metric that they track as they're developing stuff, and it also helps them get more visibility on Steam as well. So if you find something that you like the look of on Steam, even if you have no intention of buying it immediately, it is worth adding it to your wish list, because that will help out that developer enormously. So if you did find any stuff in Steam Next Fest, for example, or if you spot anything that you like the look of but you're maybe not going to buy just yet, stick it on your wish list, and it helps. It helps in a way that you don't have to spend any money for, but it's just a click. So a lot of people don't seem to be aware of quite how helpful that is, so it's worth mentioning.
I think people in general are not aware of how algorithms and metrics work on the internet. I mean, you and I will both attest to that with our absolute exhaustion with attempting to make our creative works visible on social media. It's just like my for the love of God, like and comment. That's all I ask.
Yeah. It's like I'll retweet a picture of Nepgear's ass and I'll get 500 likes, and it's like, here's an interesting article about the first Evercade that ever got localized. 2 likes, 1 retweet.
That I spent 6 hours painstakingly researching.
Yeah.
Here's a painting that took me 78 man-hours across 2 months of my exceedingly limited free time. 2 likes, 1 comment.
Yeah. Oh, dear. Yes. Anyway, anything else you've been up to? Because I've been talking for a while there. So.
I've been playing a little bit of Rival Megagun. That's been really interesting.
Yes, tell me a bit about this, because this looks cool, and I think there are still copies available from First Press. So when I get paid, I might try and pick up one of these. But tell me a bit more about it.
It would be the perfect game for us to play online against each other on the Switch. It's just fabulous. So, you ever play Twinkle Star Sprites?
Yep.
It's basically like a spiritual successor to Twinkle Star Sprites.
Oh, good. So, that's what I thought it was from what I was looking at.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah.
Yeah. So what you basically have is a horizontal shooter infused with kind of the spirit of competitive puzzle games. So things like Puzzle Fighter or Puyo. So you have the screen is split in half. You have 2 players, and you're each playing a vertical. You're each playing a vertical shoot 'em up with your ship.
Right.
You're fighting other ships. You have 2 hits. You're allowed to get hit twice before you die. And you shoot enemies. It's a typical shoot 'em up. You have a bomb. You have your regular shot, and then you have a secondary shot that sends an attack over to the other side of your opponent's board.
Yeah.
So when you play the shoot 'em up, you basically want to just be applying all the normal strategies you would play when you're playing one normally. So you want to be chaining. You want to be catching the popcorn enemies and reducing the amount of downtime between hitting an enemy to keep your chain high. And as you chain, it does 2 things. A, it fills your super meter. And that super meter is what you expend to send attacks over to your enemy's side. If you can fill that super meter all the way up, you can go into what's called Megagun mode. And that's when you turn into a boss, basically, and go over to the... Then you go over to the other side as a boss.
Awesome.
And then and then it totally changes your controls because you're on the top of your opponent's screen, and in each button on your controller is a different shot pattern. And so you are literally being a shoot-'em-up boss trying to take down another player. Then also, every time your chain terminates on your side, so like you hit 12 enemies in a row, and then you miss the chain. The higher your chain generates vortexes on the side of the your opponent, when your chain terminates, those vortexes birth additional enemies.
Right.
So the higher your chain, the more enemies you're forcing your opponent to fight. While you're also sending barrages of heat-seeking missiles over to their side and hopefully trying to charge up to become a giant robot over on their side, like blasting stuff everywhere. It's cool. There's a couple different ships. They all have a very, very wide range of attack styles and patterns. Yeah, it's just a ton of fun. There's not a whole heck of a lot to write home about in terms of like level progression and stage design, because that's not really what the game's about. Like the backgrounds are just kind of backgrounds, and the story's throwaway because it's entirely just meant to be an arcadey versus experience.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
It's mechanically rich. It's visually great, pixel art aesthetic, bright colors, cool ship designs. It just feels right. The shooting feels right. It's clear that the people who made it paid an incredible amount of attention to making not only a unique game, but a competent shooter. It's very fun, and it's very interesting to me to play a shooter where the competitive element isn't 100% tied to score. Yeah, like it's more like directly competitive. I mean, before, in the shoot 'em up scene, without games like this, really the competitive quote multiplayer end quote element was either you were playing co-op mode together on screen, or you were taking turns trying to do like 1cc score comparison runs, right? Yeah. This is very much like, I'm gonna try to kill you by being better at this game than you. Like it's fighting game mixed with vertical shoot 'em up in a really thoughtful way that just works.
Yeah. I'm surprised that hasn't been done more often, because, I mean, Twinkle Star Sprites is a great example. This sounds like a really cool example. Have you tried the Versus mode on Space Invaders DX?
No, not yet.
Yeah, as part of the Space Invaders, what's it called, the Invincible collection that we both got hold of recently.
Yeah.
Space Invaders DX has a really good Versus mode that is kind of like this. So you're playing kind of a small scale game of Space Invaders, but certain Space Invaders in your formation are different colours, and when you destroy them, they do different things to either you or your opponent.
Okay.
And it's very simple, but it's a really kind of effective example of what we're describing there, of sort of having this direct competition between the pair of you while you're sort of focusing on your own thing, but you're also trying to prioritize the things that will inconvenience your opponent as much as possible.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. This is the kind of multiplayer stuff I can really get into.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I can't recommend it enough. And we've talked potentially as we experiment with the evolving structure of this podcast about doing like chat and play sessions where we we show the game we're playing. Like this would be a great game for us to do that with. Yeah,
for sure. There's a bunch of things I would like to try together, and say what we're planning on maybe trying in this respect is playing some multiplayer stuff together for one thing, and also if I can figure out how to stream something from my capture setup to you via Discord as well. I can play something and maybe you can sort of comment on what we're doing as well. So we will experiment with all these things going forward. Lots and lots of possibilities, and sort of our more sort of casual approach to this will mean that we can try different things, and if they work, great. If they don't, well, whatever.
and that's also to say too that we're not completely discounting the dedicated topic episodes.
Absolutely.
But when we decide we've come up with an interesting topic worth spending the time on, instead of doing 2 hours of talk about news and what we've been playing before, and then doing another 2 hours on a topic and making these beastly podcasts, we'll probably just do a special episode about said topic.
Yeah, I think what will probably tend to happen a bit more is kind of something that's already happened today, which is that certain topics will naturally come up as we talk about what we've been playing lately or what's been happening in the news lately. So I think that's what will probably tend to happen in the long term. But yeah, if there is like a particular thing that we want to focus on 1 week, we can always do a special episode or something like that. I think we probably got scope to. For example, when we get our limited run copies of the Castlevania collection, we could do a Castlevania episode or something like that. Might be fun.
Yeah, that would be very cool. Yeah, so lots of possibilities, and we're really hoping that this open structure is something that is beneficial to everybody out there. Our hope is that it means shorter, more digestible podcasts more frequently, which benefits everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. On that note, is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
No, I think that's me today. I got a nice, relatively free weekend to get some gaming in, so I'm really hoping to check out a few things in the backlog. So
yeah, same here. I was hoping I would have a copy of Mario Golf yesterday evening because it was supposed to arrive yesterday evening, but it didn't show up. So I was hoping to be able to talk a bit about that today, but it should be arriving today, all being well, if Amazon are doing their job properly. Or, well, if they were doing their job properly, it would have been here yesterday. But hopefully I will have some more to talk about with that very soon. Anyway. All right. Would you like to tell people where they can track you down online?
Sure. As always, you can find my artwork at ccaskieart.com. There's also links on there to my DeviantArt gallery page. My screen name on DeviantArt is Mr. Gilder, MrGilder. Please pop on and give my stuff a look.
Good stuff, and you can find me in a bunch of places on the internet at the moment. As I say, the Atelier Mega feature is continuing over at MoeGamer.net at the moment. We're currently looking at Atelier Sophie, first of the mysterious games. You can find most of my writing for the day job over at ricedigital.co.uk, and we've also just launched a new site called retrounite.co.uk as well. That's sort of gone into soft launch at the minute, and we're doing an official announcement and sort of properly getting that rolling at the start of July. So go and check that out by now. If you want to take a look at it early on, but that will sort of have a lot more stuff happening with it once July rolls around as well. And of course, there is all my stuff on YouTube as well. There are the Atari A to Z series, 3 of those every week. Tuesdays, Atari 8-bit games. Thursdays, Atari ST games. And Saturdays, Atari 2600 arcade and 5200 games. And I've also just launched my new Retro Select series as well, which will be on Fridays. And that's just, I've got a retro game I feel like playing, so I'm going to play it. Anyway, just remains for us to say, as always, thank you very much for watching and or listening, and we'll see you again next time.